Welcome to Hard Script.
We were 3 years into the marriage when she started slipping phrases into conversations like weapons wrapped in ribbon. Little things. You're too safe. My friends say I settled too young. Maybe I need to rediscover myself. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Work, boredom, identity crisis, whatever excuse she wanted to try on that day. I didn't push back. I gave her space. Because that's what real men do, right? But the space didn't heal anything. It just gave her room to rewrite the story. Her friends? They weren't friends. They were a committee. Loud, single, bitter women who never stayed in relationships longer than a lease agreement. And suddenly, they became the source of wisdom. Not her husband. Not her vows. One night, we were standing in the kitchen, dinner half made, tension thick, when she dropped it. Word for word. I should have taken their advice. I paused. Didn't ask which advice. I already knew. They'd been in her ear for months, planting seeds. You could do better. He's boring. You're too hot to be tied down. And she watered those seeds like they were gospel. She expected me to fight, to argue, to prove them wrong. But all I did, I slid off my ring and set it on the countertop. No anger, no noise. Just a single sound, metal on marble. Clean. Final. She blinked, stared like I'd slapped her. But I didn't speak, didn't explain. Because she didn't deserve a debate. She wanted to join their club? I made sure she got the full membership package. That night, I moved out. Quietly. Strategically. I'd already been preparing. Bank access restricted. Joint credit cards frozen. My name off anything we shared. Documents filed. The kind of exit you don't come back from. By the time she realized what happened, the locks were changed and the silence was airtight. She tried calling, then texting, then rage posting, cryptic messages about loyalty and being blindsided. But I didn't respond. Because when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And when someone says they wish they'd taken bad advice, let them live in it. Let them sit at the same brunch table, single, bitter, and alone, next to the same voices that cheered when she gave up the one man who would have walked through fire for her. Now, she's got the wine glass, the group chat, and a brand new roster to match the one she envied. As for me, that was the moment I stopped being her safety net and started being her lesson. She expected wreckage, that I'd be crashing on a friend's couch, half-dressed, drowning in takeout boxes and regret, maybe even texting her late at night, asking for one more chance. She didn't know me at all, because while she was busy curating her victimhood online, I was rebuilding something she never saw coming. Day one after I left, I booked a month-long rental, quiet, clean, minimalist. No memories. No reminders. Just space. Then I did something she'd never do. I shut up and focused. I pulled money from our joint account 2 weeks before I walked. Legal. Clean. Cover my share. I'd consulted with a lawyer, not for revenge, but for precision. I changed my number. Not because I was hiding, because she no longer had clearance. Then came the real upgrade. The job I had been putting off applying for, a role 2 states over, more money, more freedom. I hit submit. They called the next day, interviewed me the same week, hired me before she even realized I was gone. Meanwhile, she was online dropping cryptic bombs. Sometimes silence says everything. Let them go so they can find what they think they're missing. I'm healing. The irony? She was posting like she lost something. Because she had. A week later, a mutual friend tagged me in a photo. Just a rooftop shot. Evening skyline. A whiskey glass in my hand. Smile calm. Presence controlled. I didn't post it, but she saw it. And that's when the text started again. Not questions. Not apologies. Just noise. Hope you're okay. Heard you moved. Didn't expect you to go this far. But I didn't respond. Not once. Because the power wasn't in making her hurt. It was in letting her hear the echo of her own choices. The same friends who once said I was too simple or too soft, they were already bored of her story. Her drama wasn't fresh anymore. Her victim mask was slipping. And all I did was live, move, grow. While she was trying to get a reaction, I was too busy unpacking boxes in a new place with a view she'd never earn access to again. The ring she threw away with that one sentence? It wasn't just a symbol. It was her last anchor to a man who stayed quiet, but always kept receipts. And now? Every new day was proof that I never needed to explain myself. Because real evolution doesn't need validation. It just leaves the past exactly where it belongs, behind you. It was a Thursday night when the message came through. I was mid-rep in the gym, headphones in, focus tight, when my phone buzzed twice. I almost ignored it. But something about the name made me stop. Melissa, her closest friend. The loudest voice in that toxic echo chamber she called a support system. The one who used to post passive-aggressive quotes about freeing yourself and not settling for comfort. The one who told her, "You could do better." I opened it. No emoji. No flirty bait. Just a straight shot. I know this is weird, but I wanted to tell you something. I didn't agree with what she did. Not all of us did. I stared at it. Sat down on the bench. Another message followed. You were good to her. Better than she admits. We told her to stop playing games. She didn't listen. I didn't reply. Not because I was stunned, but because it all made sense now. Her crew wasn't united. They were divided behind smiles. Group chats without her. Side conversations she never heard. The same women she thought were cheering her on were already pulling away the second the illusion cracked. Melissa went on to say she'd been the only one who told her to slow down, to stop treating the marriage like a hobby, to stop poking the bear, waiting for a reaction. She thought you'd always stay, she wrote. We warned her. Now she's spiraling. That part, I already knew. The silence I gave her wasn't just absence, it was reflection. And reflection, without control, is a brutal mirror. It doesn't lie. It doesn't soften. It doesn't flinch. But the twist? Melissa didn't stop there. She added, you don't owe her anything. But for what it's worth, we noticed. You were solid. She just didn't want boring. Until her life got too loud to handle. Boring. The word she'd weaponized. The thing she feared becoming. But now, she was living in chaos, sponsored by the very advice she used to undermine me. I didn't engage Melissa beyond a polite, distant thank you. I didn't need her to validate me. Her words just confirmed what I'd already understood deep down. I hadn't lost a wife. I dropped an anchor. And the storm that came after? Not mine to weather anymore. What mattered now wasn't her regret. It was my refusal to be dragged back into the gravity of someone who mistook consistency for weakness. Let them gossip. Let them talk. Because somewhere in that silence, she realized the truth. She wasn't the one who walked away with power. She was the one who watched it leave and never come back. It wasn't an accident. Not even close. She showed up at Mason & Company, a spot I hit for Sunday brunch almost every weekend since I moved. I never posted about it. Never tagged it. But word gets around, and I knew enough mutuals had mentioned it for her to catch on. She came dressed like she wanted to be noticed. Hair done. Subtle makeup. The kind of casual that takes an hour to put together. Walked in like she owned the place. But her eyes were scanning. Not for a table, but for me. She found me by the window. And froze. Because I wasn't alone. Sitting across from me was someone new. Not flashy. Not clinging. Just present. Grounded. A woman who didn't need to prove she belonged because she didn't view life as a competition. We were mid-laugh when I saw my ex standing near the door. She hesitated. Caught between the instinct to approach and the crushing realization that she had no role in my life anymore. Not even as an awkward hello. I didn't wave. Didn't flinch. Just locked eyes with her for one calm second, then looked back at my company. That was it. That was the hit. No dramatic confrontation. No public scene. Just the soundless recognition that her old playbook didn't work anymore. She waited a few minutes near the counter. Pretended to check her phone. Glanced my way a couple more times like she was building the courage to speak. But I stayed silent. Because silence was the only language she respected, and the only one she couldn't control. Eventually, she left. Didn't order. Didn't linger. Just faded out the same way she tried to fade back in. My date never asked who she was. She didn't have to. The energy shift was obvious. The tension floated in the air like smoke off a blown-out match. But it passed quickly. Because that's what peace does. It absorbs noise without letting it settle. Later that night, I checked my phone. Nothing from her. Not a text. Not a call. Just a single view on a story I posted hours earlier. Something small, unrelated, but enough to tell me she was still watching. Still tethered. Still spiraling. But the version of me she once knew? He wasn't watching back. He was too busy living in a world where she no longer had access. Even when she stood just 10 feet away. It came on a Wednesday. Midday. Right between meetings. Her name lit up my phone like a ghost refusing to stay buried. I didn't open it immediately, not because I was avoiding it, but because I wanted to see if the new me still flinched at the sight of her name. I didn't. When I finally did read it, the message was short. 7 words. I should have trusted you, not them. That was it. No punctuation. No follow-up. No flood of apologies. Just one sentence sitting in my inbox like a ticking clock that already ran out of time. At first, I thought it was bait, some subtle way to reopen a door. But the more I read it, the more I realized it wasn't written for a reaction. It was written because she had nothing else left to say. She knew that the friends who'd filled her head with noise had all disappeared the second she slipped. The same people who called me boring, predictable, too safe, were now busy with their own chaos, their own failing attempts at love. One had moved out of state. Another got dumped 2 weeks after my ex left me. The last one, she blocked her after a screaming match over something as small as brunch plans. They weren't a sisterhood. They were a crash course in self-sabotage. And my ex finally realized she was the only one who paid the full price for listening. But here's the thing. Her regret didn't move me. It validated me. Because that sentence, that quiet, too late sentence, was proof I never needed to shout. I didn't have to blast my side of the story. Didn't have to smear her name. I just had to keep moving, while she stayed stuck in the ruins of a decision she couldn't reverse. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of principle. Because I wasn't going to give her what she came looking for, the reassurance that I still cared enough to respond. The truth? By the time she figured it out, I had already outgrown the need to be understood. She thought she'd walked away from a man who'd wait in the wings. But what she really walked away from was the last version of herself that still had a chance. Now, she lives with the echo. Not because I left, but because I left quietly and never looked back. The message came late. Not from her, but from someone I hadn't spoken to since the early days. Claire. One of her friends, but not that kind. Claire was the quiet one in the group. Observant. Never loud. Never involved in the games. She never cheered her on when things got messy. Just watched silently from the corner. Her message was simple. Just a heads up, she's not done. I didn't respond. Didn't ask what she meant. Because part of me already knew. People like my ex don't fade quietly. They need a closing scene. A final say. A performance to mask the emptiness that followed the storm they created. It came 2 days later. A long, carefully crafted post on her social media. A story. Emotional. Selective. Strategically vague. Full of metaphors and half-truths. She didn't name me, but everyone knew. She wrote about being emotionally abandoned. About a man who chose the silent treatment over repair. About how she listened to the wrong people, but wasn't the only one who made mistakes. She wrapped it in poetic pain. Enough to bait sympathy. Enough to control the narrative just a little longer. And in the comments? The usual suspects. You're so strong. He didn't deserve you. Glad you found your voice. But this time, something shifted. Under the surface, you could feel it. The tone had changed. No one asked why she waited so long to speak. No one questioned how a man could move on so quickly unless he'd already detached long before she noticed. And then, one comment stood out. Just a single sentence. Funny how silence can be louder than spin. It had no likes. No replies. But it stayed there, untouched. Like a quiet truth buried beneath the noise. She took the post down the next morning. Replaced it with something neutral. A quote about healing. A picture of coffee. Just enough to reset the timeline. But it was too late. Because by then, the people she once used as mirrors stopped reflecting her back the way she needed. And I never said a word. Never posted a response. Never engaged debate. Because control isn't shouting your side louder. It's knowing you've already said everything by doing nothing. She wanted closure. She wanted to twist the knife one last time. But the blade was dull. And I was already somewhere else. Mentally, emotionally, physically. While she was stuck in a story that no longer had a protagonist. Only a narrator searching for sympathy. It didn't take much for her to figure out who I'd kept close after I left. One of them was Ryan, my oldest friend. The kind of guy who doesn't post much, doesn't talk unless there's something worth saying. He stood by me through everything. Never asked for details, never pushed for gossip. Just gave me space and loyalty. She messaged him. And that was her first mistake. I found out when Ryan called me, his voice low. She reached out, he said. Didn't know if I should tell you. He read the message out loud. It started polite. Hope you're doing well. Then veered off. He's moved on really fast, don't you think? Followed by, I just wonder if he was really ever there emotionally. Not a question. A dig. She was planting seeds. Not in me, in my circle. Trying to rewrite the story from the outside in. But what she didn't understand. People like Ryan don't operate on gossip. He read her message once, closed it, and blocked her. Then called me. That's what loyalty looks like. But the damage wasn't in the message. It was in the intention. She couldn't reach me, so she started circling, trying to tap the shoulders of people in my life, hoping someone would bite, validate her version, or at least tell her something about me she didn't already know. It was about access, control, a final grasp for relevance in a life she no longer had clearance for. That night, I went through my contacts. Not to prune them, to protect them. Because this wasn't about staying silent anymore. It was about making sure the silence couldn't be weaponized. I tightened the perimeter. Let a few people know. She's watching, she's probing, and if she reaches out, don't engage. Not because I was afraid of what she'd say, but because I knew how she said it. Subtle, manipulative, dressed up in vulnerability. The kind of message that makes you feel like you should respond, out of pity or curiosity. But all it takes is one crack in the door, and she's back inside your peace. And I'd rebuilt too much to let that happen. So I closed the loop. Made it known, there is no us. No reconciliation. No friendship. Not even history worth revisiting. Because once someone tries to invade your peace through the people you love, they're not seeking closure. They're seeking control. And silence isn't just distance. It's defense. It was a surprise invite. A mutual friend, one of the few who stayed neutral, was hosting a private party. Career milestone. New house. The kind of thing where showing up meant respect, even if the guest list wasn't ideal. I almost declined. But then I remembered something. Avoidance doesn't equal peace. Control does. So I went. Not out of ego. Not out of curiosity. I went because I could. Because I wasn't the one hiding anymore. She arrived late. Walked in like it was her stage. Hair perfect. Smile practiced. I saw the pause in her step when she noticed me across the room. And then saw who I was with. Not a new flame. Not a trophy. Just someone solid. Confident. Composed. The kind of woman who didn't need to perform to feel seen. We stood together naturally. No cling, no performance. And that's what cracked her. I watched her keep the mask on for 30 minutes. The fake laughs. The strategic positioning. The glances every time someone got too close to me. She wanted people to notice. Wanted them to whisper, "That's his ex." But no one gave her the script she was used to. Because this time, no one pitied her. They watched her try too hard. They watched her mirror every move I made. Like she could still play the role of the one who walked away. But that role was gone. Because I didn't flinch. Didn't approach. Didn't break eye contact when we crossed paths. Just nodded once. Cold, clean, and kept moving. She laughed louder after that. Talked faster. Started drinking. By the end of the night, she was outside, sitting alone on the patio, scrolling through her phone like it could distract her from what the night had just confirmed. That I didn't belong to her story anymore. She wasn't the victim, and I wasn't the villain. We were just two people who'd made choices, and only one of us had grown from them. When we left, I didn't look back. Didn't check for her reaction. Didn't care who saw what. Because healing doesn't need applause. It doesn't need an audience. It just needs silence, and a moment like that, where the one who used to shake your world sees you standing firm and realizes she no longer has the power to move you. You can tell when someone hits the bottom, not because they cry, but because they stop pretending. It was a Monday when I got the alert. An unfamiliar login attempt on one of my old accounts, a shared streaming service we hadn't touched in months. One I'd forgotten to deactivate. It wasn't about movies. It was about access. A test. To see if the password still worked. To see if I'd notice. I did. And that's when I knew she wasn't done. She needed one more thread. Something to justify breaking the silence. Something to pretend was innocent. That night, a message came through. No subject. No greeting. Just, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the next 2 hours doing something I should have done sooner. Every password changed. Every shared platform closed. Emails filtered. Old storage accounts deleted. Photo backups wiped. Not out of bitterness, but because access, even digital, is still a door. And every door she could still peek through was a liability. This wasn't paranoia. It was precision. I backed up the important stuff. Made a clean, cold sweep of every loose string. Then, just when I thought the silence had settled back in, I got a call. From an unknown number. I let it ring. But the voicemail? It wasn't rage. It wasn't tears. It was calm. Too calm. She said, "I know you're not angry. I know you're just gone. And I think that's what hurts most. That I can't even get you to hate me." That was the tell. She didn't want closure. She wanted chaos. Because chaos at least means connection. But I wasn't going to give her either. I didn't save the voicemail. Didn't replay it. Didn't respond. I simply blocked the number, removed the backup, and added it to the list of things that no longer existed in my world. And just like that, the door she cracked open slammed shut. She called again from another number 2 days later. Didn't answer. Filed it the same way. By the end of the week, the pattern was clear. Every move she made was just a shadow of the control she used to have. But I wasn't the same man she left. Because the real power isn't in reacting. It's in vanishing from their reach. Not as a game. Not as revenge. But as a final act of discipline. And when you disappear with purpose, they're left holding the silence they created, louder than any scream you could have thrown back. 6 months. That's how long it took for the silence to turn permanent. No calls. No messages. No login attempts. Just pure, uninterrupted peace. I built something new in that silence. A new job. A new place. New routines that didn't carry the ghost of her opinions. I was no longer healing. I was growing. And then one afternoon, Ryan brings it up. We're grabbing coffee, nothing deep, just catching up. He says, "You hear about Jenna?" I shake my head. I hadn't thought of her in months. He hesitates. She moved back in with her mom. Quit her job. Something about a breakdown. I pause. Not from guilt, but from how distant it all felt. Like hearing news about a character from a book I stopped reading a long time ago. He goes on. Says she's telling people she lost herself in the wrong relationship. That she's taking time to find herself. Rebuild. I don't say anything. Because there's nothing left to say. That version of her, the one still trying to rewrite the ending, doesn't exist in my world. She's in a chapter 1 already closed, sealed, and shelved. But Ryan presses. You really don't feel anything about it? I finish my coffee. Then I tell him the truth. I feel like I survived a storm that never wanted to end, and now I'm standing in sunlight. That's all. He nods. Says nothing else. Because that's the thing about silence. Once you live in it long enough, you learn to recognize the difference between peace and the pause before another storm. And this was real peace. She could say what she wanted, call it what she needed, build any version of the story that made her feel better. Because in the end, she wasn't telling it for me. She was telling it to convince herself that losing me wasn't a mistake. But deep down, she knew. And everyone watching the fall knew, too. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost her last anchor to sanity. Stability. Real love. Not perfect love. Not flashy love. But solid. Consistent. Loyal to the bone. And now, she's alone. Not because I left, but because she gambled on attention and lost everything built on respect. And me? I didn't move on out of revenge. I moved on because staying would have meant becoming unrecognizable to myself. And that final line? Here it is. She said she should have taken her friend's advice. So I slid off the ring and made sure she joined their club, single, bitter, and alone. Welcome to the roster. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.